8:45, this is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. The news edited by J. Yogaraj, read by Soundit Avam. The President says if the government's policy work plan to revive the stalled economy is implemented properly, then the country will definitely achieve the goals set out by the IMF. A meeting between President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the representatives of the University Professors Trade Union is scheduled to be held tomorrow. The court revokes travel ban on former President Mahinda Rajapaksa. China, Sri Lanka and active communications on debt restructuring. Sri Lankan rupee continues to strengthen against the dollar. 3 new provincial governors sworn in. The AG mulls transferring the Express Pearl case to Singapore International Commercial Court. Sri Lanka to attract 500,000 tourists by the end of May. News overseas. At least 8 killed by heavy flooding in Italy as river levels continue to rise. In sports, Leonardo Bonucci, Italian Juventus captain, says he will retire at the end of next season. A meeting between President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the representatives of the University Professors Trade Union is scheduled to be held tomorrow. The meeting will focus on income tax amendments. The chairman of the trade union, Professor Shyam Balanaik, said that the meeting will focus on proposed changes in the income and pay tax systems. The government plans to regulate the operations of the Samudhi Bank. A committee has been appointed consisting members of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and State Finance Ministry officials to empower the proposed system of the Samurdhi Bank. A special meeting was held this afternoon at the Finance Ministry under the chairmanship of State Ministers Shehan Semasinghe and Anupa Paskal. The meeting focused on the ways and means of restructuring and empowering the Samurdhi Bank system. State Minister Shehan Semasinghe said the main objective of the Samurdhi Development Department is to empower the society and the low-income population. China and Sri Lanka are currently in active communications on the island nation's debt restructuring, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Wednesday. Quote, China supports financial institutions in working with the Sri Lanka side and continues to play a positive role, unquote, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said in response to a question at a regular press briefing. Quote, we call on commercial and multilateral creditors to take part in the debt restructuring in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan government has said it will discuss the matter with creditors including China, unquote. New governors have been appointed for 3 provinces, the President's media division says. Thereby, the following governors were sworn in before President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. Lakshman Yapavewardena, Northwestern Province, PSM Charles, Northern Province, Senthil Thondaman, Eastern Province. The new appointments were made after the governors of the Eastern, Northern and Northwestern provinces were removed by the head of state on Monday. The originating claim pertaining to the claims action on merits of the Express Pearl incident was filed in the General Division of the High Court of Singapore, naming the Attorney General of Sri Lanka as the claimant, according to the Additional Solicitor General Administration, Chaitya Gunasekara. The claim named 6 defendants and was filed on April 25, 2023. The case conference hearing was taken up before the General Division of the High Court of Singapore on 15th May 2023, and a further follow-up on the said case conference has been scheduled for 1st June 2023. The Attorney General's Department is currently exploring the possibility of transferring the case to the Division of the Singapore International Commercial Court under the rules of procedure of the SICC. The litigation of the Express Pearl incident is being handled by a Singaporean legal firm appointed and retained with the approval of the Cabinet of Ministers to represent the interests of the government of Sri Lanka. According to the exchange rates published by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka today, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the US dollar. The buying rate per US dollar was recorded as 302 rupees and 42 cents and selling price at 316 rupees and 18 cents per US dollar. The Sri Lankan rupee has remained within the 320 to 310 range since the IMF loan approval in the month of March and has remained stable over the last 2 months. Over the last week, the Lankan rupee has continued to appreciate against the US dollar. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. President Ranil Wickremesinghe said if the government's policy work plan to revive the stalled economy is implemented properly, then the country will definitely achieve the goals set out by the IMF. In addition, this will also give strength to achieve the economic growth within a short period of time. The President made these comments at a meeting with the Ministry Secretaries and Provincial Ministry Secretaries held today at the Presidential Secretariat. The President further said the mistakes that occurred in the past should be corrected and make sure that it does not happen again in the future. The President also emphasized the importance of restructuring of loss-making government institutions. The government will not allow the people's money go waste in the form of loss-making institutions. Many constructive changes will be done to the government institutions, the President added. Tourist arrivals to Sri Lanka will hit the 500,000 mark at the end of May, an official from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority said. Up to May 14, 2023, a total number of 477,227 tourists visited Sri Lanka, with India dominating the market with 9,323 arrivals, showing a 26% increase against 2022 May. The Russian Federation visitors stood at 3,686, a 10% increase, and the United Kingdom was third with 2,523 tourist arrivals in May. Total arrivals for 2022 was 719,978, and Sri Lanka now targets in excess of 2.5 million tourists for 2023. That's local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
The Colombo Fort Magistrates Court today ordered a completely revoke the travel ban imposed on former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and 3 others in connection with the magisterial inquiry into the Galface attack. The court had earlier issued an order preventing former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, MP Namal Rajapaksa and 15 others from leaving the country following the mob attack that took place at Temple Trees and Galface on May 9, 2022. President's Counsel Shavindra Fernando, appearing for the former Prime Minister and 3 others, moved court to revoke the travel ban imposed against former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, parliamentarians Pavitra Banyarachi, Rohita Begunavardhana and former Provincial Councillor Kanchana Jayaratna, since they were not made as suspects in the case, and came to you in the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
On to Watchlight. The Public Health Inspectors Union has forewarned of an exacerbated health problem in the near future, since the tests to identify COVID-19 patients are not being currently carried out at the ground level. Making a special statement today, the President of the Association, Upul Rohana, emphasized that the people need to follow the health guidelines again for their own safety. A viral illness and also a condition that can be suspected of being COVID-19 are widespread at present at the ground level. Especially it is spreading like an epidemic within schools and other institutions. He said therefore the general public must act responsibility at the moment, and that came to you in Watchlight. On to a bulletin of world news making headlines tonight. Global warming set to break key 1.5 degrees Celsius limit for first time. At least 8 killed by heavy flooding in Italy as river levels continue to rise. China shuts down over 100,000 fake news social media accounts. The World Meteorological Organization raises alarms, saying at least one of the next 5 years will be the hottest on record. It is near certain that the next 5 years will be the warmest period ever recorded, the United Nations has warned, as greenhouse gases and El Nino combine to send temperatures soaring. The World Meteorological Organization said today, for the first time ever, global temperatures are now more likely than not to breach 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming until 2027. But that did not necessarily mean the world would cross the long-term warming threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement. At least 8 people have been killed by heavy flooding and mudslides in the northern Italian region of Emilia-Romagna, with more than 5,000 residents being forced to evacuate according to local authorities. The bodies have been retrieved from various locations. The Vice President of Emilia-Romagna, Irene Priolo, told reporters, adding that the rains were easing but that river levels were still rising. The region, which has been suffering a prolonged drought, is under red alert, the highest level warning or state of emergency for life-threatening weather events. The Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix scheduled for this weekend has been cancelled and the site evacuated. China has intensified efforts to clean up the internet from false news and rumors, closing more than 100,000 online accounts over the past month that misrepresented news anchors and media agencies. The Cyberspace Administration of China launched a special campaign to clean up online information, focusing on social media accounts that disseminate fake news and impersonate state-controlled media. The regulator said it had wiped 107,000 accounts of counterfeit news units and news anchors and 835,000 pieces of fake news information since April 6th. The cleanup comes as China and countries across the globe grapple with the onslaught of fake news coverage online, with many implementing laws to punish culprits. And that concludes this bulletin of world news.
Development news.
For the first time, the Sri Lankan Ministry of Education will come to a partnership with 5 different private sector institutions to develop skills and career guidance among the younger generations, said the Education Minister Susil Premajayantha at the inauguration ceremony of Skills Expo 2023 exhibition at the BMICH on Friday. The minister also said that there are 3 pillars in education, that is knowledge, attitudes and skills, but required skills are lacking and therefore separate institutions will be formed for each identified common skill. He also said the government will also change the system of education accordingly, based on certain techniques learnt at a recent conference conducted by the UNESCO, where he attended in Paris and London. He said that the Skills Expo 2023 event is a clear example of this joint effort between the government and the private sector, and he commended the involvement of funding agencies, and that came to you in development news. And on to sports, it's soccer. Italian Juventus captain Leonardo Bonucci says he will retire from football at the end of next season. The 36-year-old has won 8 Serie A titles over 2 spells at the Italian club and made his 500th appearance against Sevilla last week. He also has 120 international caps and was part of the Italy side that beat England to win Euro 2020 in July 2021. That's sports news. We take a look at business news next.
Go ekak thiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගීන හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business news sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Dr. Harsha Cabral assumed duties as the new chairperson of the NSB today at the NSB head office premises. Dr. Cabral is a President's Counsel in Sri Lanka with 35 years' experience in the field of intellectual property law, company law, commercial arbitration, securities laws, international trade law, covering both civil and criminal aspects of the said areas of the law. He has been a President's Counsel for 17 years and commands an extensive practice in the commercial high courts and the Supreme Courts of Sri Lanka, and has 16 attorneys at law working in his chambers. That's business news, economic news to follow.
Business news sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekak thiyana youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න ඇස් වහගෙන දැකපු ගීන හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all new NSB Ithru Mithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Economic news, courtesy of
LONC Finance is taking the power of innovation to the next level, winning 5 golds at the Technovation Awards 2022, leading the digital revolution with cutting-edge interbanking digital payments. LONC Finance claims the overall gold award, whilst also claiming an extraordinary victory in digital banking.
According to the exchange rates published by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka today, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the US dollar. The buying rate per US dollar was recorded as 302 rupees and 42 cents and the selling rate at 316 rupees and 18 cents per US dollar. The Sri Lankan rupee has remained within the 320 to 310 range since the IMF loan approval in the month of March and has remained stable over the last 2 months. Over the last week, the Sri Lankan rupee has continued to appreciate against the US dollar and came to you in economic news.
LOLC Finance is taking the power of innovation to the next level, winning 5 golds at the Technovation Awards 2022, leading the digital revolution with cutting-edge interbanking digital payments. LOLC Finance claims the overall gold award, whilst also claiming an extraordinary victory in digital banking. LOLC Finance will continue to innovate with the next generation digitalization of financial services, delivering a superior customer experience.
Weather report.
The Met Department says that showers or thundershowers will occur at a few places in the western, Sabaragama, central and eastern provinces and in the Mullaitivu district during the evening or night. A few showers may occur in the western coastal areas and in the Gaul and Martara districts during the morning too. This weather report was published this evening at 7:30 p.m. Further details could be obtained by visiting the official website of the department. To conclude this bulletin of news, a recap of the headlines. The President says if the government's policy work plan to revive the stalled economy is implemented properly, then the country will definitely achieve the goals set out by the IMF. A meeting between President Ranil Wickremesinghe and the representatives of the University Professors Trade Union is scheduled to be held tomorrow. The court revokes travel ban on former President Mahinda Rajapaksa and others. China, Sri Lanka and active communications on debt restructuring. The Sri Lankan rupee continues to strengthen against the dollar. 3 new provincial governors sworn in. The AG mulls transferring the Express Pearl case to the Singapore International Commercial Court. Sri Lanka to attract 500,000 tourists by the end of May. At least 8 killed by heavy flooding in Italy as river levels continue to rise. Leonardo Bonucci, Italy and Juventus captain, says he will retire at the end of next season. With that, we conclude tonight's news broadcast.